Absolutely fantastic to see you guys, and we're going to have an intense 45 minutes to wake us up a little bit after yesterday's party. So, as you can see, Paula JANUSZKIEWICZ, it's a very long last name, but technically I'm from Poland, but let me tell you, of course, a couple of words about myself, about what I'm doing, very briefly, and then we get into the presentation. So, as you can see on the slide, I'm the CEO of Secure. That is the company that I have established actually 14 years ago, so quite a long time ago. And we are placed right now in 4 locations, so New York, Dubai, Switzerland and Poland. And what we do purely, and this is what I've been doing pretty much for my whole life, is pen testing, all together with the incident response and forensics. And with my team being almost 50 people right now, so since last time we saw each other, things changed a little bit. Apparently, cybersecurity becomes more and more important subject. We are, of course, dealing with different aspects of cybersecurity. So not only pen testing, we are writing the tools as well, of course, but also the consultancy in the cybersecurity field, also in the CISO sphere. So it's not a new role, as we know, but eventually they also need support, especially in times of COVID, where they had to simply take a bunch of decisions in order to switch to the remote. So I'm also Microsoft Regional Director. It's a kind of a funky role, I will tell you, because I'm not working for Microsoft, just to make it super clear. I'm not a director, and definitely I'm not a regional, so what's this? So this is actually the very honorable role that Microsoft gave me some time ago for being innovative into technologies. And this is something that really helps out to grow in cybersecurity as well, because every year we try to meet up in Redmond in order to comment on security of different solutions and so on. So that's pretty much where the role comes from. Absolutely nice to see you back. And also after our presentation, I'm going to give you the link to tools where you can download everything that I'm going to be doing on the presentation. I tend to, of course, speak at the events. We always share at the events some tools and so on. So this is pretty much what you can expect. And that is what we're going to do this time. So this time, basically, we as well talk about this strong story to tell. And that strong story to tell about the 10 mistakes of administrators about the remote work. It's about all the interesting places, situations, misconfigurations that administrators do. Why top 10? Why not? Obviously, there is more than 10. But I would love to share with you a bunch of stories where our job is going to be to conclude, basically, what can we do to be better in the cybersecurity field. But before we start, just one more thing, of course, to share with you. If you would like to get this presentation as well, I'm sharing with you the QR code, because lots of people are asking, do we get a presentation? Yes, you do. It's there. Yeah, so we don't need to ask that question anymore. So make sure that you're going to download it. It's there. There is a link. And there is also, by the way, a link to the tools. So now we can start and focus on the pleasant stuff. So during the pandemic, when we were simply not allowed to travel, we could actually travel a little bit, depending on the background. So we were actually in a situation where our customer is like a series of factories. So they were placed in China, in US, plenty of factories in Europe, and so on. They got completely smashed by the ransomware. And of course, interesting thing is that they actually hired a negotiation company, just imagine, in order to negotiate the ransom. And that was funny because they were contacting the hackers help desk, because this is to the point where there's actually a help desk that you are calling to in order to fix your case. And they managed to negotiate the ransom to pay, which was €500,000. So quite a lot. So what they got for it was actually a decryptor, because that's what everybody would expect, that unfortunately was not working. And the problem was, so we paid money, now there is this decryptor, it doesn't work, so what do we do next? So they actually called us and they said, okay, you guys need to come over and let's figure it out, like how can we recover our infrastructure? They did not have the freshest backup, as you can imagine, that's why they were paying the ransom. And at the same time, they were like hoping that maybe the decryptor is gonna work, but maybe they are doing something wrong. And that is exactly what appeared, because when we work at the decryptor, encryptor. To be fair, I'm not a developer, but when you open the code, it looked like a medieval age or kindergarten programming level. And that decryptor was just super easy to be analyzed. Well, maybe not super easy, but just easy. And when you take the data that was encrypted, and this was one of the interesting lessons that we learned during this project, I was working with like an almost 1 terabyte file, like a database simply. The first 8 megabytes seems to be encrypted, only 8 megabytes, so it's like a small chunk. And then at the end of the file, they were adding 512 byte key that it's supposed to be used in a way that the decryptor tells you. So the decryptor wasn't really the key, it was a method, right? So when I look into different files, they had like kind of like the similar pattern. Up to 8 megabytes, chop, clear text data, 512 byte key. But for some of the files, actually, I mean, we're talking infrastructure here, yeah? So it's thousands of files being encrypted in a different way. So for some of the files, we could see that there's like a copies of 512. And we are all in IT. 512, it's not there by accident, right? So if you can multiply it twice, 3 times, and so on, and then they were just stick to the end of the file. So I said, okay, so maybe it is that these files are encrypted a couple of times. So that 8 megabytes is just a couple of times. Answer is no. So what happened after some analysis is that that first 8 megabytes was indeed stuff that hackers were encrypting, but because of the data that was in use, unfortunately, the encryptor was coming in and it was crashing, coming in and crashing. So finally, it managed to encrypt this 8 megabytes, that was the goal, but before that, the data was randomly to this random points encrypted. So we had to work out where is this cut line where we use this 512 again and again and again in order to get into this 8 megabytes. So that kind of experience shows that through laziness, because we cannot call it differently, for not encrypting the whole set of files, it's just encrypting the 8 megabytes. So it's like hackers are a little bit lazy over there. There is some effectiveness, which technically is focused on encrypting as many files as we can. So at the end, we are dealing with someone that is maybe not even that experienced, but just has a little bit of money, pays for the kit in some kind of a whatever affiliate model, and then basically encrypts the data of the corporation. And in this particular customer, you might be wondering how hackers actually managed to get in. And that was fun, because they actually get in through the vendor. So it's not that user, click on the link or something happened, someone brought a USB device and so on. No, no, no. It was actually a vendor that was attacked. That vendor was managing their domain, and someone managed to learn that lesson. So it's a little bit of a kind of an espionage. And then they were sitting in their infrastructure for approximately 3 weeks in order to learn what is the most sensitive, how things work out, and so on. And then they hit them by, of course, encrypting a big part of their infrastructure. So the reason why I'm saying this story is because when we look into the statistics of the 2021, we have the summary of the year that says that there's a 1,318% of an increase in ransomware attacks in the first half of 2021. That's crazy. So eventually, when we look into other details, then we've got 77% of organizations do not have a cybersecurity incident response plan. So how we are supposed to respond well to these easy things, while, of course, we are not prepared. And at the same time, the statistic here says that 94% of malware is actually delivered by email. So this is also quite interesting because, again, 85% of attacks, they actually involve a human element. So when we do connect the dots, we can see that security of the endpoint, it's definitely trending right now, and the education of a user that works as a very good backup for technology in order to prevent, of course, all these attacks. And that 360 days, this is also quite an interesting number, because this is a number of days to contain the breach, to locate and contain the breach. So there are different sources for that. Yes, some people say it's like around 200, some people say it's like 316, as you see, but in general, like when we are talking hundreds over there, it's quite a sad statistic showing us that maybe our monitoring systems are not in place yet. Following up with like what FBI said, these guys said that since COVID, there's a 300% increase in the reported cybercrimes. So we might be wondering, why is that? Is it because of the user? Is it because of the technology that we are using? And I would say both, but definitely phishing is still a #1 mean of transportation for malware. Therefore, when we summarize 2022, or when you kind of like look into the future maybe a little bit, we should, I think, call 2022 as a year of a well-written, well-established and tested incident response plan. And to be fair, a little bit of suggestion, I think that incident response sounds like an order in a restaurant. Yeah? So it's more like you order some, I don't know, French fries, and then basically they're gonna be like, oh, what do you wanna have? And then you respond. It's like so polite. Who's going to pay for that? Yeah, so we are renaming it right now to the crisis management. Yeah, so cyber crisis management plan, because if executives hear that, they're going to be like, oh, we don't want to have a cyber crisis. And the first thing they do, they turn to IT. So we need to kind of convince them in order to actually step into the process to be obviously addressing their business risk. Now, when we think about all these top 10 mistakes by administrators that are done about the remote work, just to give you also a little bit of a flavor, and then we start. When we look into the statistics from ESET, I really like them because they're very relevant. We can see that 81% of people, they actually use a personal electronic device for work-related functions. Okay, so we give it to kids, for example, this is the last statistic, 46%, and then the kid does something and then introduces a threat to our organization. We know the drill, but just wanted to mention it, that this is also a bit of a case. So when we look at these top 10 mistakes, what are they? First of all, I think we should start with the misconfiguration of the endpoint. And when we think about the misconfiguration of the endpoint, question is, okay, what do we set up on the endpoint to be resistant to the current threats? And one of the things, of course, should be firewall, it could be antivirus based on machine learning, anti-exploitation solution, and all that stuff, fine. But do we design it well according to what is actually the current threat? Because, for example, if we do have a PowerShell, can PowerShell communicate over the network? Normally, yes. Why we are doing this? So what kind of processes are supposed to communicate over the network? Yeah, let's technically blacklist everything and whitelist what can communicate. And this is simply a setting of a firewall. So what I'm trying to say is that firewall nowadays, it's becoming more of an application-related firewall. So on the endpoint, so we've got a PowerShell, we've got a C script, we've got all these scripting languages and different LOL, BAS, LOL bins capabilities in Windows, for example, that are able to communicate over the network that can do the harm. But eventually, we should focus more on whitelisting only what? Outlook, Edge, Firefox, Chrome, name it. Yeah, maybe 10 more business apps, but that's it. Excel is not supposed to do it. And therefore, I would have to show you a demo with an interesting perspective on Excel, actually. So it's a very much pretty simple demo where we do have a netcut set up on a hacker side, and then basically we've got the machine that is the user receives an email, that's apparently a phishing. You can see that this is a macro. Obviously, you will never click on that, but user will, it has the context, yes? So user could open it, but that's not really my point. My point is to show you what happens next. So we've got Excel, and eventually user, of course, is gonna just click on enable editing, classic stuff, and then enable content in order to be able to run the macro. Pick. We've got that. There is a connection made. By who? By some kind of an executable. Can we technically run an executable maybe from the even Windows folder and so on? Okay, that's a question. Here, when we look inside the macro, you can see, of course, that that's just like one big button. And then there is a resource, secureacademy.com. We're downloading the TXT file. And then by using the certutil, we're not downloading but using certutil, but just decoding. And then we are creating the process. Otherwise, it will be found by antivirus solutions, right? So when we get that connection here, of course, we can do, who am I? And then the next stage is that we can see that we are just a regular user. So this is the set of privileges for users. So we are secure Paula, here we go. And then the next part is that we're going to download an execution library to search for potential privilege escalations. So we're going to do curl, and then we've got a 10, 10, 10, 10, and 250. Let's download some from payload privilege escalation PowerShell script. So long story short, we do output privilege escalation PS1, perfect, and while a regular user, you can see it here, cannot change the execution policy within the PowerShell, the regular user can actually bypass it, yeah? So we can actually there's over 20 ways of doing it, but we're gonna do it in process. So set execution policy, bypass, scope, process, that's what the user can do, and then basically the next part is gonna be just to run that privilege escalation script. So we are doing it, enter, awesome, and that searches us for the libraries that are allowing us to do some hijacking. Now, for example, like what is this about? Here there's a DLL. That DLL is actually loaded, as you can even see here, by the task scheduler upon service startup. Okay, so what kind of identity are we gonna gain? And also, it runs from the modifiable path Python 27. So long story short, we're gonna do curl, and then 10, 10, 10, 10, and then 250, and then we're gonna do payload, and then we're gonna download the reverse DLL in place of the WPTS extensions DLL in Python 27 folder. So let's do that. And of course, that DLL is replaced, so easy stuff. And then we're going to do dir just to be sure that we got that. Yeah, so we've got that DLL, of course, it's still there. Yeah, so that's the setup. OK, so the next part, it's going to be related with just shutting down the client in order to load a library upon the scheduled task. So shut down RT1, here we go. We are just here restarting. We've got a netcut that we set up for the listening. And of course, as you can imagine, there's a DLL loaded by the scheduled task, the task scheduler, and eventually it will connect back to the hacker. Now, question is, in how many systems that you know that will be possible that you've got some kind of a DLL running by the scheduled tasks, and then at the end you will see that it actually can connect out. Yeah, and if you do who am I, you can see that we are here anti-authority system. Yeah, so this is quite an easy scenario, but demonstrating us how important the application treatment becomes in terms of network communication on the endpoint. Just one of the mistakes. Now, overly simple passwords and security questions. Yeah, what do we mean by this? I mean one thing. Like, of course, MFA, it's we're not supposed to even call it a trend. It's a must. Yeah. So not to make a comment really about it, because we all know what it is. But what I want to say is that administrators, when they turn on MFA, they kind of think that, oh, that's the way to protect us from the passwords leaking, from the identity leaking. Not exactly. It's just one of the ways to protect us from this. But if we do have an access, for example, to the user's workstation because of the phishing activity, then it's a different story. MFA can be bypassed. And this is what I wanted to show you as one of the misconceptions, actually, around MFA. So for this, we're going to use the evil jinx. So let's dig in. So we've got an evil jinx, and within the evil jinx, we're going to generate the link. So we've got a lures, and then get URL for Teams. Yeah, so this is the one that we got. Login Teams, microsoftonline.com. What.co? CO, it's not a Microsoft domain. It's actually our domain. We bought it, we bought a certificate, so it's all good. Now, it looks almost the same. User will not notice. So user gets this link, so login teams, microsoftonline.com.co. Let's actually have a quick look. So you can see it's certificate, it's all trusted, all valid, and so on. So it's a little bit of a passé to check only the certificate. We put in the username, Abby Secure Ninja, and then we put the password, and then we just do sign in order to sign in. And then we approve the sign-in request. OK, user is doing this. So this is the multi-factor authentication part. Great. Stay signed in. Yes, no, doesn't matter, because we're going to be redirected to login microsoftonline.com. Now, of course, getting the passwords, like with this attack, it's like attack from 80s. So now we're going to do a little bit different stuff. So all authorization tokens intercepted. So here we go. Sessions, just to check, we got this. And we're going to display our authorization token. And that is something that we're going to be submitting into the browser in order to log in as a user. Yeah? So let's do that. So we're going to go to the original portaloffice.com. So now it's all good, and we're gonna just do what? Like, should we put the username? No, because we have all the details in the token itself. So we're gonna get that, and we're gonna submit it into the current session in order, of course, to be able to be that user. So we go to the cookies, and then here we go. We can just do add, and first we're gonna, of course, delete everything so that it's a clean situation, and then we are importing that particular token, and then check. Here we go. And then the next thing that we only have to do is just to restart, because office.com is available right now for us based on that particular authorization cookie as this user. So quite an interesting perspective, showing us that endpoint security, once again, is an important thing. Now, of course, when we do connect to the network using the VPN access, then we should be accessing only certain repositories. That's all clear. Just to make a point about it, because when the hacker is already connected on the user's network, then on the user's computer, then we are able to use this machine as a proxy. So here is the network segmentation that comes to place. But when we think about being connected to the network and being literally nobody in that network, what comes to place as next is actually lack of SMB signing. And this is, to be fair, one of my favorite attacks, because it just pretty much always works. And the lack of SMB signing means that it's not really that is just the problem. Lack of SMB signing, when you combine it all together with NTLM version 2, that is what is a problem. So long story short, NTLM version 2 being a challenge response protocol allows us to take a response and relay it to the target. That's why, of course, we call it an SMB relay. It's one of the simplest attacks, but at the same time, the most efficient. So let me basically get into this so that you can see how easy it is, and then, of course, we will discuss the further steps around the attack as well. So here's the setup. So I've got simply the Kali over here set up, whatever. You can also do it in PowerShell by using invade relay, also another option. So we're going to do here a use exploit multi-handler, and then set payload Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP. Let me just make it even a little bit bigger. And then you can see that I'm setting up the L host to the current attacker's IP, and then the only thing I'll need to do is to do exploit, and over there I'm doing the SMB relay XPY. So there are many ways of doing it, and upon execution I'm running the executable CQ shell 104a.exe. Now this is just a simply generated reverse shell by using our toolkit. Now what I'm going to do on my side, I would just simply query the // IP, and // IP triggers NTLM version 2 authentication. So how probable is that someone's going to hit // IP or / short name? Very probable, and that's what we're going to do. Enter. So right now, we've got a session opened, just like that. It's not a vulnerability, it's a misconfiguration based on using NTLM version 2 and SMB not signed. 668, migrate, 668. So we are doing right now, as in Metasploit, we call it migration. Migration is such a romantic word. You are migrating. Yeah, but truly, what migration is basically just injecting the code into the memory on one of the processes and simply allowing us to become someone within the instance of that process. So long story short, right now I am in 668, so in SVC host, and just having a code written in the memory address of SVC host. Is that fixable? Yes. We have to have a well-configured exploit guard or any anti-exploitation solution that, again, takes us to the endpoint protection. Yeah? So again, in order to fix this problem, we have to sign an SMB. If we got a possibility, try to avoid using NTLM version 2. You can always use the fully qualified domain names. Plus, of course, whitelisting comes to place because we were able to execute the code that technically we did not know. So this is also one of the mistakes that we could summarize upon this situation. Okay, so another part, it's simply allowing an unusual code to execute. So one thing was an executables, whitelisting, and so on, but we also allow, for example, things like macros to run. Are macros even like supposed to run at all? And that takes us actually to one of the demos that I wanted to show you, related with the attack surface reduction rules. One of the funniest, nicest risk minimizers right now. So if you're going to go to the Microsoft Defender antivirus within the group policy, and then we go to the Defender Exploit Guard attack surface reduction, this is the rule that we are talking about. So eventually we can just enable it. It's not really exciting, because the only thing you will need to do over there is to drop an ID of a rule that you would like to assure. So that is pretty cool, because if we look into the website over there from docs, you've got the attack surface reduction rules, and please have a look at the rule names. We've got to block abuse of exploited vulnerable signed drivers, but also we've got to block all Office applications from creating child processes. That is purely macros. We've got also blocking, for example, the process creations, like you see, originating from WMI or PSExec. So we can take that rule, and of course, this works in a very easy way, so we just like paste it. Yeah? So right now, anything PSExec related, even though you might have a blocker or anything else really, will just not be allowed to run. So here, you're just enabling the protection against scenarios. And there's also more, like for example, the blocking the Win32 calls from Office macros, and that is awesome because Win32 API calls, it's actually a pretty advanced type of a macro because you're going to execute the code inside Excel. So long story short, it will be lovely to test it. Yeah? So let's see what we got. So here we've got our ABI user. Let's just do gp update/force. And then the next part, it's going to be to verify whether our policy works. And it's just an extension of a Defender. Yeah? So here we go. And by the way, it just works by default in system if you are using the classic Defender. So here we go. There is a little bit of a macro we knew from the previous demo. And eventually here we've got like a button to click. So here we go, enable content. And user is like, oh, what is this? And then you can see that that particular thing has been blocked because there is a Win32 API that is happening. Yeah? And that is something that we can also reflect in the log. We are able to see that one in a virus and threat protection, for example. So if you go to the protection history, not only it's in an event log, but of course here, you're able to quickly see that there is actually an administrator that blocked this action, and you can see that there is a Win32 API calls from Office macros scenario that worked. So quite an easy setup, one of the best, in my opinion, solutions that are out there. All protocols and their default settings, exactly. So one of the mistakes, essentially, is not to perform the regular reviews on the legacy stuff. What has changed in the legacy environment? So what kind of unfortunately, technology debt that we got, that is there, that is actually a pain for us that we have to solve. And one of these technology debts, I would say, it's actually a TDS, so the tabular data stream protocol that is used by the SQL Server. Now, however challenging that sounds, guys, I've never seen a SQL Server that is configured well, like from the scratch. So there's a bunch of consultants that come over, they install a database, that's it, to provide a database functionality, and that's kind of what we end up with. So long story short, it's by default wrong. Why is it wrong? I would love to show you this. So in general, badly configured SQL Server allows us to, well, spoof traffic to the application or /database just because the TDS itself, it's actually in a clear text. So let's dig in. Let's see what we got over there. So we've got a query. So select customer ID, company name, contact name, address, city from customers, and so on. OK, so simple query. If we execute it, you guys can see that we are getting a result. So this is a classic query to the database. Now, we're going to refresh the logins because, as we can guess, something's going to happen here. We've got a Bob, secure administrator, SA, and so on. So that's it. Yeah, not much. Nothing wrong over there. But that particular query, once, of course, we do set it up in the network, it can be captured, and it could be also spoofed. And that is what we're going to do. So let's go to the other side of a story over here. And we're going to be simply running maybe a Wireshark in order to capture that particular query. Yeah? So let's just get into the Wireshark. Yeah, let's just run it maybe from the icon. Here we go. And our job, it's going to be to use the TDS filter in order to capture that traffic. Let's wait for the moment till it runs. And here we go. We've got a TDS filter that is already preset. And the next step, it's going to be go to, of course, here, just to simply capture on all of the interfaces. That's it. And then we are monitoring that connectivity. Now, the only thing we're going to do is just to use this query. Here we go. And execute. And look at this part. Here we are capturing it in the clear text. So there's already like some select, process ID, some stuff. And if we go like down, 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 here we go, then you can see that there's a select, customer ID, company name, contact name, and so on in the clear text. Awesome. So let's replace it. Why not? Let's see whether that would work out or not. So the TDS is also one of my favorites because, again, it's quite ignored/forgotten. So if we do have noted that particular query, the next thing we can do, we can just replace it on the fly by leveraging a little bit of an RP poisoning. So for that, we're going to use the ethercap or whatever you guys are going to use. But what is important is to smartly change that query. So for this, we're going to use the SQL inject as well. And within the SQL inject, I've already predefined the query, select customer ID, company name, contact name, as you can see. And that's the address city from customers, so exactly how it was. And then here we got, instead of that, put create login, hacker with password, password1, yeah? And then the next part is, of course, the specification in between which kind of host it runs. So we've got our ethercap over there as well. So lovely, yeah, that is running over there. And the next part is, of course, we're going to go to the SQL server, do the query, let's do it, and then you guys can see that it says actually commands completed successfully. So it's a different stuff. But it says so because we did indeed put on the commands to create a hacker user, as you can see, found our string and replaced it. And then the next part, of course, we have to do is to go to the logins over there, and then we can just refresh it. And then we're going to see if we got some additional user over there hanging out just because this is in a clear text. And as you can see, there is indeed a user hacker created. So this is TDS, tabular data stream, by default configured like that in vast majority of these organizations. Now, how can we protect this? Simply in the SQL Server management console, you go to the network properties and you set up a certificate for the server for the communication. It's that simple. You just need to get a certificate for the server authentication. So here we go, so that we are able to actually use it to protect the connection. So long story short, that is quite a big issue that we are dealing with. Now, trusting solutions without knowing how to break them. That's another mistake. For example, we use an antivirus solution. How do we stop it? We use a monitoring solution. How do we stop it? For example, for example, we use Sysmon. Sysmon is amazing, don't get me wrong, but Sysmon itself is a mini filter driver. And if we do have Sysmon like this, we are able to actually disable it. And the tool that we are using for that, and let me show you this one here, is actually related with the unloading the mini filter driver. So we go to the FLT MC, it's a built-in Windows tool. There is a Sysmon driver, yeah, so here we go. And if you go to the FLT MC, and then you've got here the possibility to load a filter driver or unload the filter driver, or you can attach it, detach it from the volume, yeah? So eventually we can do that here, unload, and then we are specifying a Sysmon driver, enter, like not very talkative tool. FLT MC shows you that we have no Sysmon anymore. And this is how you offload Sysmon. And Sysmon doesn't work anymore. So if you are using Sysmon as a feeder for CM systems, which don't get me wrong, it's amazing. Though this, it's hard to notice, because if we do sc query Sysmon driver, bring it on, then it actually says it's running. Yeah, so you just offloaded it from the filtering solution, but it says it's running. It's not running anymore. It's not doing anything. So it's like a fake sense of security. So all your bulbs that you have over there, it's going to be green because it's running. Not really, yeah? So of course, we could be like, oh, this is so bad, this one is bad. Of course not. What is bad over there, it's having too many privileges. And privilege that is needed for that, it's called load and unload filter drivers. And eventually, device drivers. Yeah? And eventually, that is assigned for the administrators. So we could be like, well, then it's okay. Because our users are not admins. Then it's, of course, okay. Because that is what we want. Now, whenever we are thinking about these trusting solutions without knowing how to break them, there are so many aspects that came out to place during the pandemic. For example, SolarWinds. As we know, of course, their code was, in short words, poisoned, and it was distributed to many networks in this world. Now, what do we do with this? Obviously, it's a third-party supply chain vendor-related attack. So, is it really something that we can actually do about it? And here comes the place for a word that I'm a little bit ironic about. That's called zero trust. You guys know the theory. While at the same time, we have to trust solutions that we are using in some kind of a way. There is no, in my opinion, such a thing like a zero trust. So we could get into the ideology, but you always have to trust someone. And the point is that if you cannot control the software that you are running in the infrastructure, for example, solutions like SolarWinds, nothing against them, but you know the drill, then what we have to monitor is an identity. So every attack is always related with an identity. So what kind of identity can this software leverage in order to attack us? Do we know that? So if we do have like different services running, different antivirus solutions and so on, if they're stopped, if they're overtaken, like what can happen? So that kind of a platform analysis would be great to do because that's going to give us a flavor of what's going on in our infrastructure, what is even possible. Maybe this will never happen, but who knows? Therefore, I would like to bring one demo over there. And that demo is related also with one of my favorite subjects, to be fair, because this subject is related with, of course, solutions that we use on everyday basis. So let's say you use 7-zip, you use, for example, some custom apps, and so on. We've got a case of a log4j, so different libraries, and so you know, again, the drill. But question is, who is actually writing that code? Do we do a proper search about that? Sometimes it's not possible, and I'm trying to be very reasonable here. But what I would love to show you is just one thing here. Here we've got a user. Yeah, that's just, his name is Freddy, actually Freddy Krueger, so here we go. And if we're going to log this guy, if we're going to log in, so Freddy Krueger logs in with password. Yeah, as you can see on the screen, regular Microsoft password. And Freddy itself is a domain user, so nothing special about him, besides the fact that he actually stores passwords in the Google Chrome. So this is a typical user activity, yeah, so to say. Prize users that are using the KeePass or anything like this, then you're very lucky. But long story short, it's all a matter of education, and here we go. So Freddy did that. He stored a password. Now, this is Chrome Pass. It's not Chrome. Why Chrome Pass? It's accessing passwords in Chrome. Because it's a rule of thumb that every app that you run as yourself has access to every other secret managed by every other app. In other words, if you run Chrome Pass, it not only can have access to the password in a Google Chrome, but to any other password that you potentially store. This is, of course, the case of a DP API. Now, my team and myself, we did a reverse engineering of a full cryptographic platform in Windows. We're decrypting pretty much everything that moves. So if you guys would have any deeper questions, like you were totally concerned about something, come over after the presentation. I'm happy to provide more details. But what I would love to show you today is under which conditions we are able to extract these users' data. First of all, if a hacker is going to run phishing and then user is going to run some code, then of course you got access to all of the user's password. And there are many other hacking tools for that, like Lasagne and so on. Yeah? This is easy, because you run it in the context of the user. But when it gets difficult is to ask the question, can, for example, some other person from the outside of the workstation decrypt this password? And of course, I'm not going to spoil it. Let's see. But also, obviously, I bring only bad news today, so you can probably say yes already. Yeah? Anyway, let's move forward. What are we going to do? I would love to show you this one in the scenario. Yeah. So one thing, and this is a little bit of a theory that I have to mention, is that user's secrets are truly dependent on the user's password's hash. So for the domain users particularly, our secrets are dependent on MD4 of the user's password. And for the local users, it's actually SHA-1. Yeah, so that people don't get the MD4 from the SAM database. Yeah, so it's very logical. But for the domain users, it's MD4. Now, this is a rule of thumb that eventually there is another entity that is able to get access to our passwords. But first, let me break this scenario to show you that when I change the password of the user in an illegal way, user will not be able to get access to the secret, which proves the point that the secrets are dependent on MD4. So let's dig in. I'm going to do it, by the way, just to explain myself offline. But of course, we could say, well, BitLocker will prevent. I totally know and agree. But you can also do it online. The reason why I would do it offline, because it's more linear in a demo. So it's a little bit easier to explain what is happening step by step. So let's dig in. So we're going to do next, repair your computer. And then we're going to do troubleshoot, advanced options, command prompt. And here we're going to just increase the font. So let's do it. And of course, we're going to get into the tools. So let's go to the DCQ tools. And in this case, we're going to go to the known by you Mimikatz Secure Edition. But this is basically our module to extract the cache logon data. So let's say dump. And we're going to do here cache. And then we're going to go into Windows. I have to write the path. So system32, config, and system. And then Windows, system32, config, and security. Here we go. Why these two? Because system contains the boot key that encrypts, decrypts cache logon data that are in security. Some people call it cache credentials. Don't do that, please. These are not credentials. They have nothing to do with being credentials. You cannot log on with this. You can only compare with it. These are not credentials. But that's just a language thing, yeah? And of course, I'm going to prove it to you in a moment. But we have already overwritten cache logon data so that we can log on with the different password to the Freddy Krueger's account. But of course, in order to do it, I have to just simply disconnect this computer from the network. And using this opportunity, let me explain what the cache logon data is. So cache logon data stored in registry in Security Hive, this is called MSDCC2. And MSDCC2, it's a result of a function PBK df2 used by Azure Key Vault, by KeyPass, LastPass, and so on. It's like an industry standard. And over there, we've got username as one of the parameters. We've got a DCC1, which I will explain. And then we've got as well HMAC SHA-1, 10,240 iterations on 16 blocks. So it's a pretty cool value, taking into consideration the DCC1, which is nothing but the MD4 on the top of the username and joined joined with the MD4 on the top of the user's password. So DCC1, by the way, was actually used in Windows XP, including, and in Windows Vista, from now on, we are using the MSDCC2. It's OK to store cache logon data, credentials, not really credentials, yeah? So you can see that with this value, we're not able to submit it and log in. There is no like plastic cache credentials attack. There is no such a thing, because nobody will say yes to this. Also very romantic. So anyway, let's go to Don't Save and Freddy. So here we go. Let's verify what we got. So Freddy Krueger, password, enter, doesn't work. So maybe something else. So one that we are comparing with the registry, in this case, is going to be Mimikatz. Why not? So we log in, and as you will see, let's go to the CQ tools, and over there, in the Chrome Pass, you guys will see that Chrome Pass itself really works hard on getting access that secret, and that doesn't work. Okay, why it doesn't work? Because my current password hash on the top of the Mimikatz, so MD4, is not capable to decrypt the, as we call it, new thing, master keys that are in the user's profile. So here we go. Let me get in to the user's profile then. %appdata%, where are the master keys? Freddy, appdata, roaming, Microsoft, protect, SID, quite a long path. And then these are these guys. These files, we call them master key containers. Here we go. And all of these, they contain 2 keys, the same ones. They are like the same. One is encrypted with our passwords hash, so MD4, but another one, question mark, is encrypted with what? Actually, I will show you. With this key here, BK, backup. It's called BK Secure because of the secure domain, but it's backup your domain name. This is the public key of the domain. What if I told you that this is just one key for every single user, for every single secret in the whole domain? That's how it is. So here we go. Let's extract it from the domain controller in order to learn what kind of threat we are in, while, of course, our domain is potentially compromised. Yeah? Here we go. It's not my dog, by the way, if you wondered. I wish I would be really cute. OK, so here we go. So what we're going to do here, this is the domain controller. Now, let's go to Tools. And over there, we've got the CQ tools. So CQ Elsa Secrets Dumper, this is one of our tools. File, exported, PFX. So if our data is encrypted with the public key, we have to decrypt it with the private key, and that private key we store on the domain controller. You cannot get it in the certificate manager or whatever. It's actually maintained as a simple blob of data, like this, in the entities.dit. And it's really like hard to identify it. It's just like a piece of text that appears to be a PFX. So the next part is that we have to import it. So let's just do next, literally password secure, next, and that's it. And let's go to the cert mgr msc to learn, like, what is it? And here we're learning that that certificate is actually issued to nobody and issued by nobody. It's like a ghost. Now, hey, it expired. It was created in 2012, and it expires after 1 year. So I bet you might be wondering now, like, OK, but can we renew it? No. You might be wondering, OK, what if we rise a functional level of the domain? No. So let me simplify that for you a little bit. Whatever the question you ask, answer is no. Can I fix it? No, including this one. So there's nothing you can do. Now think about it. If it leaks, you have a really big issue. Because while you can reset the Kirby TGT, password twice, whatever, you can do the KDS root keys reset, all this stuff. While you can do this after the domain is under attack, this one you cannot fix. It's not a good news, you know. So long story short, what about admins that were there, they're no longer there? Totally. I always like to think about the domain as if it is already compromised. Your privacy is already compromised. Because we were living in times where we were not having privileged access management. Domain admins were humans. And they were accessing this. So let's use this, and now we got it. So we use it in a very simple way. While we are in Freddy's computer, let's just get in to the tools. We're going to, over there, within the DP API, generate CQ hash calc for the Mimikatz one, so in order to re-encrypt our secrets with this password hash. So the next part is to use the CQ DP API blob searcher in order to go to the directory. It's a very nice tool to search for the secrets in general. So I use it for forensic in my normal job. So we've got a local Google, Chrome, and then recursive search output to C, CQ tools, and let's be nice, DP API, TXT, because there's going to be a lot of text. So that takes maybe 10 seconds, up to 20 seconds. And then DP API, TXT, we're learning, and that's interesting, that within the Google Chrome stores actually secrets that it's protecting them by using Schwawa and triple des. Not that cool, right? But anyway, this is the master key name that's used for the Google Chrome. OK, so let's go there. B55, that's this guy here. Shift right click, copy as path, and then we are super ready to build up the command. So CQ, master key AD, file, we are decrypting this guy with the PFX from the domain, with the private key, a new hash, encrypting it back again by using our current passwords hash. Boom, enter. Okay, that's done. The only thing we have to do now is to rename this guy. So let's do it. Rename it to whatever. And we've got 80 modified. Then basically I'm just replacing. Okay, and then one more thing is an attribute, and we have to set it an attribute of a system and hidden, done. So here, basically, if it doesn't work, I can go and sell coconuts. Let's check on this. Oh, phew, it works, yeah. So what happened is we managed to get access to the password of a user just because of the PFX that we extracted from the domain. Now, this certificate you can use against every user and against any secret in the domain. So what we have to do, and I consider that one as a quite a big mistake, is to set up a really nice setup for the privileged access management. Make sure that we are not using the tools that we don't know, obviously, where they come from, obvious advice, but still in infrastructure, just pay better attention to this. And at the same time, giving contractors too much access, it's one of the huge mistakes. And privileged access management not in place, it's also a mistake because these vendors, they become domain admins. They usually get that, or hiring pen testers that we don't trust. Again, zero trust is a thing? I don't think so, because they are testing our infrastructure and they are eventually having a domain admin as a goal. They want to do it. So do you allow people in your infrastructure to be like getting a domain admin in terms of what we just said? It's kind of painful. So therefore, all the actions at least supposed to be monitored so that you know what happened and you can assess the risk properly. So eventually, when we were talking about these 10 mistakes, we talked about misconfigured endpoint and the network settings on the endpoint. We talked about MFA's concept, so we are trusting it too much, so we need to understand the background that it can be also bypassed if we have access to the authorization cookie. We played with the lack of the SMB signing, so the SMB relay, all together, of course, with network segmentation that allowed us to see more in the network. We played with no whitelisting on board, saying that, of course, in case of also allowing unusual code execution, we've got attack surface reduction rules, which we can simply implement to address different scenarios. Old protocols with an example of a tabular data stream. Also playing with solutions without really knowing how to break them, it's just another aspect. And also falling for evil tools that are simply allowing, in context of users or in context of vendors, in this case, access a little bit too much if it's about our safety within the infrastructure. Of course, I give you the QR code, but don't forget to download the tools, especially the ones for the DPFUI if you want to play around. They all work in the different systems, in the different domain controllers, in different environments. If you wish to test around, please do it. We do it for education, of course. Make sure that you guys are going to check out also our blog, where we describe what is happening in Hack in Paris. And of course, as always, thank you so much for attending. Hopefully, it was worth your time, and it was an interesting session. Thanks a lot. Do you guys have some questions?
Nothing for Paula.
Here we go. Something comes to your mind, or maybe I should explain something more. All cool? All clear? Okay, awesome. Did you enjoy it? Okay, awesome. That's good to hear. Thank you.
I saw a hand go up.
Question, yeah?
And one here, up here too.
Yeah, I have a small question. How did you extract the key from the domain control?
Got it.
The domain controller.
Right. So how did we did it? We did this took us actually over 2 years. We are doing the reverse engineering of, in general, the cryptographic platform of Windows, and we are wondering what is this BK thing? Yeah, and this is how we got to the point that there is actually a value in the ntds.did that is that looks in a kind of a characteristic way. well, to us later. Yeah, now, like when we just look at it, it's just a piece of text. Yeah, and we learned that that is a PFX. So it's just a matter of trying, being mistaken, trying, being mistaken, and so on. So that's the setup. If you are particularly interested, like what is it and so on, I got actually, of course, like way detailed information about the particular extraction actually of that. That it's actually from the presentation I was, here we go, doing all together with Mike. So if you don't mind switching to my screen, that would be great. I'll show you for the moment. This is basically, here we go. This is how that value look like. So we look into, through the hex editor on entities.did, and we were looking for some patterns. We were trying to identify every single section that's there. And on left side, maybe it's not very interesting, but right side, we actually found a 256 byte length secret, and we were like, okay, maybe this is like an RSA or something. Yeah, so we started to interpret it, and then it appeared to be that PFX. So I only got the first part, and so if you could just say the second part.
So in the sense, like in order to generate the PFX file, you have to already compromise the domain, or can you do it remotely, or how can you?
Good question. Can you do it remotely? Yes, you can actually do it remotely. So it's like, you guys know the DC sync attack? Some of you, right? So DC sync attack is basically based on, and let me show you a quick thing here, based on the permissions that we got within the domain. And just to be completely not romantic, yeah, it's things, they have to have a reason, yeah, to happen. So either you need to be a domain admin or local admin on the domain controller, or you don't have to be malicious, you can be working in this company, yeah. But if you want to do it remotely, the minimum you need to have is these particular permissions on the top of the domain. The replicating directory changes, let me enlarge it, and, not or, and replicating directory changes all. And that all, it's a mistake, by the way, yet another one, that was made by administrator while they were implementing SharePoint. Because in the Microsoft documentation in the past, there was a little mistake saying that if you want to set up a user account for profile replication, this profile replication account has to have these two checkboxes. But that's a mistake. The last checkbox is super dangerous because you are pulling out the whole entities.did. So doing it remotely, absolutely possible if you got these two checkboxes on your account. Thank you. You got a question, yes? So it's over here. Thank you. So this is also quite an interesting perspective on the domain. And as I mentioned, this is something that you simply cannot fix.
Thank you, great presentation. Just wanted to let you know that many of the things that you showed, including remotely extracting a private key, is shown in the workshop later on, in about an hour, where I open sourced many of these things. Oh. So extracting private key, PVK file to extract local passwords on domain members. Also on DPA, PA, NG stuff, and so on. DPA,
PA, NG, absolutely. Yeah. So that's another part that we worked in. Yes. But for DPA, PA, NG, even though the name is similar, it's completely different, right?
True.
Yes.
It's an evolution. Yeah, true.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 4 minutes. DPA, PA, NG is just a little comment, of course. It relies on the KDS root key that is within the domain, and you can extract it in entities.did as well. This is also what you find in the properties of the domain. And in the larger infrastructure, like several thousand computers, you've got like 3 or 4 of these keys, and they are not rolling over. So if there's an attack, this is one of the things that you have to reset, but not, of course, this one single thing out there.
Blows me away.
More questions?
Offline, Paula.
Okay.
We're running a little bit behind.
Right. Yeah, sorry. So just yeah. Thank you so much again. Lovely to see you. Thanks a lot.
Go.